Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. My name is Wanda Wilson, Executive Director of Oakland Planning and Development, and we'll go ahead and get started. We have several items on the agenda tonight. We have 3 presentations. We'll also do a few announcements. First presenter will be Carnegie Mellon, giving some additional information on how their institutional master plan is progressing. And we have Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority to talk about stormwater management and stormwater projects. And we have UPMC to talk about the Bed Tower project on 5th Avenue. Some updates on programs that we have available. We're very excited to announce that we'll be rolling out applications for a program to assist potential home buyers to buy homes through the Oakland Community Land Trust. And we have funding through Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency to support Black, Indigenous, and people of color, potential homeowners with grant funds and financial counseling and homeowner education to support their purchasing a home through the Community Land Trust. So we will be rolling out the application and announcing when the application will open. So if people are interested, stay tuned to the website and social media for the date that we'll be accepting applications. And we are connecting people with resources for food pantries and food deliveries. So you can also contact Nick from our staff. His contact information is there. If you or somebody that you know in the neighborhood can benefit from food support resources. And we have a development activities meeting scheduled Thursday, September 9th at 6 o'clock to review some improvements planned for the Belfield boiler plant. And then our next Oakland-Wide meeting, the next meeting like this one, will be Tuesday, September 28th at 6. So we have one presentation on that so far, which is UPMC with some signage changes. And then another meeting coming up in September is our Let's Talk and Oak Watch, which is more of a conversation with residents around topics of interest. So this month's meeting in September will be definitely focused on a lot of Oak Watch concerns and also really a deep dive into some zoning issues and information about different processes that we may be looking at in terms of zoning changes coming up with the Oakland Neighborhood Plan, and just some general information about options that we may be seeing in our future for things like inclusionary zoning that can help with affordable housing in the neighborhood. And Oak Watch is definitely part of that meeting. And so we'll have, I'm sure, a robust discussion given some of the student behavior issues that we've faced, and sorry about the typo there. But that will definitely be a big focus of the Oak Watch conversation coming up at the next meeting in September. Next slide. So we'll move on to our first presentation, and I can do a couple reminders for people about our protocols for our meetings. We will have the speakers. If you're presenting, please turn your video on. It's easier to follow a speaker and pay attention on Zoom if the speaker has their video on. So we will ask that for our speakers. Otherwise, you can keep your video off and stay muted, and then participate in the meeting throughout the meeting using the chat feature. And I'll be monitoring the chat, and I will lead the Q&A by going through what's in the chat and articulating those questions for each speaker as we go along. We'll also have this recording on our website, and we're also monitoring Facebook input as well as the chat. And then the notes from each project will be on each project page on our website as well. So I think that's protocol. We had one question about the September 22nd meeting, about whether Oakland crossings will be part of that, and not specifically at the September 22nd meeting. We'll be talking about the process that one might expect to see if zoning changes were to be proposed, and what kind of time frame might be a reasonable time frame for people to expect to engage in a planning process around zoning changes. Generally, to get prepared for things that might be happening through the Oakland Neighborhood Plan. So we'll get started with our first presentation. I'm going to introduce Bob Reppy from Carnegie Mellon. And Bob, you can turn your video on and unmute and introduce the rest of your team. You have some other folks with you tonight.
Thanks, Wanda. Can you guys hear and see me okay? Excellent. And thanks for having us. And would like to just let it's good to be back before OPDC to talk about where we are with our master plan. This is kind of a midway point in our development, maybe a little bit more midway point in the development of our master plan. Kind of we wanted to get everybody an update on a lot of the details. If you remember, we were here back earlier this year, probably in May-ish, and talked about a lot of the kind of early ideas and early kind of preliminary thinking in the master plan. And we have a lot more detail that we're going to talk about today. Before we get going, though, I want to make sure I introduce the rest of my team. As one noted, we have working with me, presenting with me today will be Jen Beck, our project manager. We also are joined by Megan Pierce, our new project associate, who's working with us on the master plan, is also going to be working with me on kind of longer term community engagement from the university. And then, of course, we're also joined by Dawn Carter, our good friend who's been working with us on all things planning and design for the last decade from the School of Architecture and longtime Carnegie Mellon advocate. So we're excited to have the team here. We have, before we get rolling, we have two slides that are kind of update slides to just kind of remind you of where we were when we talked to you before towards the beginning of the summer. We start off with what our master plan principles are, what we think of where we are when we're going, or what we think of our kind of core fundamental values as we're developing the university's new 2022 institutional master plan, ranging everything from design through experience, mobility, context, and opportunity. And you guys can read these. We'll also make these available on our webpage. These slides are available on our webpage, so you can come and read them more. But in interest of time, let's go to the next slide, please. I think Kathy is driving, so Kathy, if you go to the next slide, thank you. Also, as we're setting up to talk about the master plan and a lot of the details, I'm going to remind you that we're looking at the campus in kind of three very distinct districts with a kind of a fourth rider to that. The first being the historic core, which is when you think of Carnegie Mellon as the kind of historic area of it that stretches from Shenley Park to Forbes Avenue. We also have, and this is an area where we're going to be focusing more on developing the campus experience and looking at some potential additional academic sites. The North Campus, going from Forbes Avenue to Fifth Avenue, is really seen as building upon the success of the Tepper Quad and looking at additional density for the university in the long-term future. To the west of that, of course, the Craig Street area, which is a very different type of district. It's a very mixed-use district. It's a district in which we do not, and nor do we want to, own all the properties. There's lots of things that are going on in that area. It's a great urban district, one of the great urban districts, I would argue. And so that it's a very different feel in that area. And then, of course, is our rider that we talked about a lot last time is our connections to Shenley Park. And so we're going to talk about all those ideas today. So if we can go to the next slide, please. We have four basic topics that we want to talk to everybody about today, which is our development sites that we're identifying in our master plan. Well, then I'll talk about those, and then I'm going to talk about mobility. And then I'm going to hand over to Jen, and she's going to talk about infrastructure and sustainability, and then community outreach. And maybe, so we'll just kind of keep moving on these. If we go to the next slide, please. So what we've identified as our development sites for this upcoming 2022 institutional master plan We're looking at 20 sites that are potential development sites. Some of these sites have been around for quite some time, maybe 2 or 3 master plans they've been around, they just have not yet been built. Some of them are new sites. Some of them are sites that we think might be built in the next few years. Some of them are sites that are kind of more blue sky thing. We want to talk about each of these as well as we look at them in the 3 districts that we have here. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. In the historic core, we have 2 sides of campus. There's the west of the cut area that we're looking at first, which includes 5 sites, including a potential new or expanded facilities operations that are kind of our roads and grounds facility, if you will. That would be down to expand the facility that's already built in the hollow. That would then give way, hopefully, then to a new academic site, which would be that's site number 2, which is where our current facilities group is housed. This would be a new potential academic building that would be located between Scott Hall and the CIC building facing into the hollow. The 3rd academic site that we're looking at on the west area of the cut would be, is it really an extension or continuation from the last master plan, which would be a filling in of the courtyard between Hamburg Hall and Smith Hall, kind of glassing in the atrium, creating new space in that area. We've also expanded it and looking at potentially enlarging Smith Hall, which is the building that sits behind Hamburg Hall. You wouldn't see any of this from Forbes Avenue, but it would allow for future development of the Heinz College. One of the big ones that's kind of coming out there as this long-term vision, this is one that may be a longer ways out, but we wanted to get it on our master plan early, so we can be thinking about it, is the potential redevelopment of Warner Hall, the Warner Hall and Sire Hall site at the corner of the southwest corner of Forbes and Morwood Avenue. We think that this site is a great potential academic site, and especially as some of those buildings are relatively smaller and maybe a little more inefficient. And then the final piece on in this area is a small addition that we're proposing to the backside of the Purnell Center for the Arts, which is where our School of Drama is, which would house an expansion for our technical shop, which does all the lighting and sets design and costume design, etc. That's in the west area of the cut. If we go to the east area of the cut, we go to the next slide, please. In this area, we have 2 projects. Number 6, which is a small addition onto the West Wing Residence Hall, and the Margaret Morrison Carnegie Hall expansion. Those are both continuations from the last master plan. Basically, we're bringing them forward exactly as they were outlined in the 2012 institutional master plan. We have a 3rd project in that area, which is up near Hammerschlag Hall, which is up on top of the hill, which is another small infill piece. This is actually a typo, that this would be actually a 6,000 square feet, not a 60,000 square feet, a 6,000 square foot, a little bit of a difference there. Basically enclosing the glass ground floor, or enclosing the open space on the ground floor of Hammerschlag House in glass so that it could become a new student commons. The last big area, you see the 2 options that we have on the bottom, 8A and 8B, are actually 2 different scenarios that we're proposing for the existing Donner Hall site. Donner, if you know, sometimes called Big Blue, which is the residence hall that was built in the 1950s on campus, is moving past its prime potentially. And so we're looking at 2 different scenarios there. 8A would be a scenario that would be focused on student housing. 8B would be a scenario that would focus on, if we were to do student housing at other locations, and we'll talk about that in a moment, that would make a potential site for a new academic building at the Donner Hall site. And so you'll see in this, when we talk about this, and you'll see on the next slide as well, how we have a couple of these spots that we're looking at, scenarios that could either be more focused on student housing or more focused on academic and research. We go to the next slide as we move to, it's important to note that for each of these sections in the master plan that we were looking at, we're going to be developing a series of urban design guidelines, as you can see here. And these urban design guidelines will guide the developments of the buildings more architecturally. As you know from your experience with master plans over the last few years, the master plan really identifies a kind of a box of which you can build within. The urban design guidelines give us additional criteria and kind of targets to be hitting in regards to height and massing, setbacks, materials, entrances, etc. For that. And these are examples of that. Again, I'm not going to read these, So we're going to, but then we will, this is going to be available for everybody to read, and you can read it on at your own leisure. If we can go to the next slide, please, Kathy. We do want to talk, then let's move to the North Campus. The North Campus is an area, as we talked about, is an area that we're looking at allowing for additional density, or maybe some more density than we normally may see at Carnegie Mellon. Buildings that could be as high as, maybe 8 stories in some places. We have two sites, both 10 and 12, which are also continuations from the last master plan. Site 10 is an expansion site for the recently completed Tepper School of Business. And site 12 is a site that has been identified. So when our health center, which is moving over to the new health and wellness building that we briefed you about last spring, when they move over to that new facility in 2024, that it's a rethinking of what that ground floor is there at E Tower at the corner of Forbes and Moorwood. The site 11 is the remainder of the Moorwood parking lot. One that we all know for many years was the big surface parking lot. And you can see on this site, we're also carrying forward 2 different scenarios. Scenario 11A, excuse me, which is a more residential focused, and site 11B, which is a more academic building focused. Again, working with the Donner site that we talked about 2 slides ago, one of these could go residential potentially, and one of them could not. And so we wanted to make sure we had that flexibility built into our master plan to allow for either of those scenarios to develop. If we can go to the next slide, we'll cross across Moorwood Avenue over to the Greek Quad. And in this area, we're seeing in the long-term vision, kind of rethinking of what the Greek Quad feels like. Right now, the Greek Quad, if you know it, that area, it's a series of 8 buildings that house a number of both sorority and fraternity facilities that were built in both the late 50s, early 60s, and then the 70s. The buildings are maybe moving past their prime, and so we're looking at a way that we could potentially add density to that site, but include the Greek housing on these sites. And you can see we have site 13, 14, and 15, and maybe a little keynote on the bottom right gives you a better understanding of how these pieces work together, creating quads that these new residential buildings would open into, creating a terminus to the view down the cut, where currently there's a Greek building right now. But it's also important to note that these would not be only for Greek housing. One of the models we're looking at is a notion of where you could have Greek housing on the ground floors, maybe the ground 2 floors and kind of townhouse orientation, and then the upper floors would be more traditional student housing, all with this intention of looking to add additional density. Why we keep talking about additional density, especially regards to student housing, is the university's priority to increase the amount of beds that are on campus. And this goes back to when we talked about the recently completed 5th Clyde building, residence hall, as well as the under construction Forbes Buehler building. The intention of the university to add and guarantee on-campus housing for all undergraduates throughout their entire time at Carnegie Mellon, and making sure that we have the housing inventory to do that, and the housing variety that makes students want to be able to live on campus. If we go to the next slide, please, Kathy. Again, we have the urban design guidelines for the North Campus, again, focusing on those same 6 main areas. But of course, these are a little bit different because this is a district that is a little more in flex. It's a little bit more contemporary in its architecture, and deliberately allows for more contemporary architecture. If we can go to the next slide, we'll shift over to the South Craig Street area. In this area, we have really kind of the top 3 projects: the Shirley Apartments, which are on North Fifth Ridge Street, the existing Whitfield Hall, which is on North Craig Street, and then the small project and maybe a new entry pavilion for Mellon Institute are really seen as kind of these kind of neighborhood type buildings, and they're going to be much more mixed use. The Mellon Institute one is interesting in the fact that a vast majority of the people who enter Mellon Institute from campus are coming in and entering through the loading dock. And so the proposal here is not something that would kind of change the historic character of the building, because Mellon Institute is in the Oakland Civic Center Historic District, but would rather potentially look at adding on maybe a glass pavilion at that loading area that would make the entry sequence into the building a little bit better for people coming to campus. The bottom 2 projects are both the north, what we call the north of Forbes, and the south of Forbes site, which are immediately right before you get to the bridge coming from Craig Street, heading east towards campus. The site number 19 is the north of Forbes site, which is we see as kind of a sister building or companion building to the recently completed TCS Hall, which is currently where the graphic arts building sits. And then across the street is a building the site that we've identified potentially for our new Science Futures building, which is a project that may be coming in the not too distant future, which would be a new anchor building for the university sciences. Both of these projects, 19 and 20, are also carryovers from the last master plan. The heights and the sizes and the setbacks are all continued from what they were in the last master plan. With the exception of site 19, we're allowing half as much square feet as we used to allow on that site, because of course we built the TCS Hall building on that site as well. And then the last slide in this development pieces, thank you, is the Craig Street area design guidelines. And again, Craig Street is a very different district. Craig Street is a mixed-use district. It is an urban district. So we're talking about things such as ground floor retail and restaurants and buildings that have maybe less setback, but more public spaces in the sidewalk area. And so we talk about these in those guidelines. So that's a real quick run through our discussions on development. One, is it best just to go all the way through and then take questions at the end?
Yeah, and I just looking at the time, given we have this many presentations on the agenda, just to give you a time check of, you've been going, about 13 minutes.
Yep.
So I don't know how much more, like, do you have that like ×3 left?
No,
or?
it's more maybe time. We're probably about 40% of the way through. That was the kind of meat of what we needed to get through. And we can talk, we'll kind of, both Jen and I will kind of glance through the next sets, if we will. Okay. And again, understanding that all these slides are available for people, and if they have questions, they can reach out to us. So let's move on to the next set of slides, which is the mobility slides. I'm going to focus on this one, and then we'll kind of walk through the other ones very quickly. The mobility goals, this really defines all of the university's ideals for plans for mobility in the duration of this master plan. And the statement at the top is really the key, focusing on people over vehicles, flexibility over status quo. The idea you can see is really demonstrated with the graphic on the right of pedestrians take priority over bikes and other wheel independent personal vehicles, over transit, over single occupancy vehicles at the bottom. And there's a whole host of ways that we want to accomplish this, including improving pedestrian pathways and connections, adding bicycle amenities and connecting to the East End bike network, working with our institutional partners to develop shared shuttle systems. And at the end of the day, the kind of big piece of this is working on working for a plan that ultimately drives no net new parking on campus from where we are at this point in time. If we go to the next slide, a lot of these slides will start to touch on it. And like I said, I'm just going to kind of breeze through these so we can get to the other parts. As we talk about mobility, there's a whole series of public realm improvements that are mobility driven. Some of these, as you'll see on the next slide, please, are projects that may be driven by the university, such as a new cross-campus cycle track to get people from Forbes Avenue to Shenley Park, or down from Hammerschlag Drive down to, or down Hammerschlag Drive from Shenley Park down to Neville Street. Some of them, as shown in the next slide, are much more focused on something we would do with our community partners, such as working with the city to correct the misaligned two sides of Morwood Avenue at Fifth Avenue, so that you have a straight shot through instead of that weird dog leg, and creating a bike connection from Fifth to Forbes along Morwood Avenue, or rethinking the intersection of Tech Street where it hits Shenley Drive and adding a three-way stop there so that pedestrians crossing from campus into the park and vice versa have a safe crossing place. Dealing with the Forbes Avenue Railroad Bridge to make, or bridge over the railroad to make the pedestrians area much better there. If we can go to the next slide, this is when we talk about no net new parking. This talks about, and it's a weedy slide, so I'm not even going to get into it too much right now. But if you look at this one, the idea is, how do we talk about, how can we make a statement of such as no net new parking when we don't know what the growth patterns exactly are for the future? And I think part of it is, it's identified here what our strategy is, but if you go to the next slide, please, we can actually talk about, and you can see from the pie charts, it's really not so much about not building more parking, but it's about increasing the modal share of other transportation modes to get to campus. And it's also a really big part of it is people working from home. You can see at the bottom of the chart, we anticipate that there's going to be a 500% increase of people coming out of the pandemic in a year from now, that there'll be a 500% increase in people working from home. That is going to have a huge impact because, if we're going from 50 people working from home to 250 people working at home, that's 200 cars that less cars that are coming to campus. And so that's part of our management that we're looking at. Working with the Port Authority on integrating into the new bus rapid transit that's coming is another part of it. Integrating with with the bike network that's being developed in the East End are also part of that. We can go to the next slide, please. We have a series of ways of also things that we're going to talk, like I said, please feel free to read these on your own. We talk about pedestrian network improvements, moving sidewalks away from the curbs, adding planting strips, adding bump outs at corners like on Forbes and Margaret Morrison Street to make the pedestrian zone safer. Next slide, please. We talk about things such as integrating into the East End bike network, creating connections across campus to really knit the evolving bike network of the East End together, and integrating Carnegie Mellon into that to make it so that it's a seamless bike experience to get to and through campus. And then the last piece on this is working with our companion institutions about looking at, are there opportunities for overlap where we have overlapping shuttles to get into a shared shuttle system so that we can be more efficient with the shuttles and potentially expand where shuttle service goes. And then of course, continuing the free access to the Port Authority for full-time faculty, staff, and students, and working with the Port Authority on the development of what they're calling their Project G in their long-range future, which is a connection from the South Hills through Hazelwood, through Oakland, and up through the Hill, and ultimately to the Strip District, and being a part of that development. That's a lot of mobility stuff that's happened all at once, and I think that was the last slide on that. If you go to the next slide, please. Yeah, it is. I'm going to turn it over to Jen, and she's going to quickly also go through our discussions on infrastructure and sustainability.
Thanks, Bob. Next slide, please. So Carnegie Mellon has a long and proud tradition of sustainable practices and practicing responsible activities towards the environment. And we're going to continue with that over the next, sort of forever, but definitely over the next 10 years as we implement this master plan. And these are 4 sort of overarching goals that we apply to all of our sustainability practices. Fulfillment of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. There are 17 of them at the bottom of the page. We're a founding member and are a committed member to the Pittsburgh 2030 district. We built LEED buildings since LEED sort of came into existence. And one new thing that we're going to do is create a platform that will help to talk about how we are doing as a campus with our sustainability practices. Look at the university as a system when it comes to energy usage, water usage, greenhouse gases, and the like. Next slide, please. So for our environmental protection goals, we think of as the sort of physical things of the environment, our steep slopes or floodplains. We are going to continue to take care of those things and maybe pay closer attention to things like increasing the amount of native plantings that we have, and reducing the amount of lawn. Also looking at a checklist, the sustainable sites criteria, and how can we apply those things to our development projects, and also the spaces between the buildings that may not be part of any specific development projects over the next 10 years. Next slide. When it comes to energy usage, we have made great strides since 2005, which was our first tracking year. We were looking at, on a square footage basis, we've reduced our energy usage by 18%. And when we look at a per person basis, we've reduced our energy usage by more than 25%. And what makes that notable is that we have increased our square footage on the campus by more than 1 million square feet. And we've also increased the size of our campus community by thousands of people. So even as those things have gone up, our energy usage has gone down. Next slide, please. We all know today and tomorrow that stormwater management is a big deal in Pittsburgh, and it's something that we face on our campus. We're going to continue to address stormwater, not just on the properties that we're developing, but also the stormwater that comes to our properties from adjacent or spaces above ours. We have a really diverse approach to doing that. We use green roofs, we have rain gardens, we use stormwater retention within our buildings, and we also, as you can see in the top left slide, we have some stormwater retention that's outside of our buildings, underground, that we can't see. So we're going to continue to look for unique and new ways to manage stormwater. Next slide, please. Green buildings, we have we have 1.5 million square feet of green buildings on our campus, and we're pretty proud of that. Essentially everything that we have built in the last 10 years has been LEED certified. That's a requirement for projects that are $5 million and above. We're going to look at projects that maybe don't rise to that $5 million level. How can we get those LEED certified? How do we get LEED certification for our existing buildings? Next slide. Waste and water management is another component of sustainability. With waste management, we're doing great with recycling and with separating our waste streams, so we can continue to do a better job with composting and having a place sort of on campus where we can separate those waste streams. We want to make sure we have enough facilities within our buildings and outside our buildings for recycling. When it comes to water conservation, as a tier 1 research university, we use quite a bit of water in our research processes. And then as our campus has grown, as I mentioned earlier, there's just an increased need for water. We have more bathrooms, more residence halls. And so we want to make sure we're looking at things like gray water usage and black water usage, and how do we strive to become water neutral. Next slide. Open space and pedestrian circulation is another sort of important component of sustainability. We found out in the last year and a half that despite the persnickety Pittsburgh weather, that people do like to sit outside. And how do we provide increased amenities for that, whether it's seating, whether it's bike lanes, whether it's a better streetscape, as we've done along the Forbes and Fifth Avenue corridors. Maybe we have we have less parking lots and more pedestrian plazas. So we're definitely thinking about the spaces between the buildings as maybe just as important as the buildings themselves. Next slide. Okay, so this is the last section. It's about neighborhood enhancement. So there are 5 components to our neighborhood enhancement strategy. We want to make sure that we're minimizing our impacts on neighbors. We're thinking about the not so positive things about living next to near a college campus. We want to make sure that we are reaching out to the community, that we're making connections and sharing the good things that are happening on our campus. We're sharing those with the community at large. We want to bring enhancements to South Craig Street. Every great college has a great college street, and ours is South Craig Street. And how do we support the vibrancy and the diversity of Craig Street for the benefit not just of Craig Street and the neighborhood, but also for the university? How do we have amenities that are open and available to all? How do we bring people into the university to experience the great things that are happening? And then how do we have a positive economic impact on the region? Next slide, please. So managing impacts on our neighbors. There are a couple components to this. We want to zone the properties that we own, sort of fold those into our EMI district so they fall under the same criteria, the same regulations as the other properties on our campus. One new thing that we're looking to do in the next 10 years is improve our engagement strategy. And Megan Pierce from our office is going to be an integral part of that, developing a newsletter to help communicate to neighbors what's going on the campus, not just with our development projects, but also activities. Like, when are the fireworks on 4th of July? When is Carnival? What sporting events are coming up? We think that we can do a better job of communicating what's going on the campus and helping to manage those impacts. Next slide, please. There are a couple of different ways we like to make connections with the community. Certainly staff, faculty, and students all do a variety of community service. There are more than 40 student organizations that are engaged in some kind of community service, and you can see a sampling of some of the organizations that receive some of those volunteer hours. Next slide, please. Education, that's sort of our mission. It's what we do. And so we don't just educate college students, we provide education at all stages of life, from pre-kindergarten all the way up through seasoned citizens with our Osher Institute. We help to teach the teachers, we provide educational materials, and our courses themselves actually put students and faculty in local communities to help understand and find solutions to problems that they're facing. Next slide, please. Research is another important component of what we do. We have lots of centers which focus on research, whether it's social justice issues, economic issues, sort of physical space issues, and all of those sort of have an impact locally and regionally. Next slide. Arts and culture, the arts have been a part of Carnegie Mellon ever since we were founded. Art, architecture, drama, music, and design. And it's not just for performance, it's not just for sending out, but it's also for doing research and bringing the community into what we're doing and what local artists are doing. Next slide, please. South Craig Street, as I mentioned, has the makings of a great college street. And we are providing support to South Craig Street businesses through OBID. We have our Craig Street crawl, which will hopefully come back in 2022 for our new students. We have a new free parking program in one of CMU's parking lots. We're working to develop solutions for increased street level retail and public art. And we think that we'd hope that we can have a positive impact on Craig Street over the next 10 years. Next slide, please. How do we bring people into campus? What do we have? What do we have to offer? Well, of course, we have drama programs, we have concerts, we have spring carnival, we have sporting events, we have numerous Division III teams. We have our recreation facilities at the Gesling Stadium that are available to the community. And what we want to try and do a better job is making sure that the community is aware of and knows how to access those amenities. Next slide, please. And finally, having a positive economic impact on the region. As we've grown, we've created more jobs, hired employees, and we're doing all these construction projects. We have a lot of research going on. We help to sponsor startup businesses. We have an entire website about regional economic impact that you can visit to learn more about the ways, thanks Megan, that you can sort of visit to see the diversity of ways in which Carnegie Mellon has a positive economic impact on the region. Next slide, please. Okay, so we've been having a lot of meetings since January. We're closing in on the 3-digit number, I think, as far as the number of the meetings that we've had sort of on our campus with community groups, with RCOs like this one, to talk about the ideas that we have for the university through 2032. Now, next slide, please. So we have some upcoming community meetings. This is the first one. You'll probably see an invitation in the next couple of days for one of our community town halls. There are 3 of them, so you can attend based on your schedule, although it'll be pretty much this presentation. There'll be a little bit of tweaks. But of course, you're invited to come in and hear this presentation as much as you want, or ask new questions that you may have. Next slide, please. If you have feedback, if you look at these slides after today and you have questions, comments, we have our own email address, cmu2022imp@andrew.cmu.edu. You can also visit our website to view these slides or sort of the evolution of the master plan. Next slide, please. As Bob said, we're a little more than halfway through the process. We really look forward to and welcome feedback. If you are part of a group aside from this one that would like to hear this presentation, please reach out to us. We are more than happy to talk to anyone who will listen. Sometimes we don't know all the groups who are out there, and so we appreciate any opportunity we have to share what we're thinking about. And I think that's the last slide.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Thanks, Jen. Great job. So why don't we open it up to questions?
Yeah, I did receive a question about the biking and walking trail in down in Panther Hollow by the rail line. Will it be kept open or will it be fenced off?
No, so currently our first building that we built down along the railway, we retained a 10-foot easement for a future bike trail. And any buildings that we build down in that hollow, we would also retain that at minimum 10-foot easement for a future trail. Right now, the existing path that comes up by the railway that only goes about 100 feet is really only intended to connect to the parking lot because there's no trail to connect to on the other end. Ultimately, however, when we're hoping that the city and the Oakland community and working with all of us will be able to drive the Junction Hollow Trail all the way up to as far as our property, which ends at the Anderson Bridge, at the Shenley Park Bridge. At that point, then we will have the land available and be happy and willing partners to continue that trail all the way up to the railroad. So ultimately having a continuous trail connection from the railroad crossing on Neville all the way down to the river is really what our ideal state is. And to match that, we also, if you remember, about 3 years ago, we actually built a sidewalk along the east side of Neville as you're going up along Central Catholic to help support that connection ultimately as well. So yeah, that's definitely something that we want to have that trail coming through there. I'm
at this point not seeing other questions, But this IMP schedule slide that you have shows you targeting planning commission before the end of the year, so November or December of this year.
It's that schedule is, we're still, obviously there's a lot of things that are moving through the city right now, and it's we're still hoping and working hard to go get to that schedule. I think if it may go into the new year a little bit with the planning commission. But that being said, I think we'd like to want to maybe schedule an official development activities meeting for October with you all, if at all possible. I think because we're about 80% of the way, the material that we have, we're about 85% of the way there with all of our material. It's a matter of kind of getting all the pieces in place in the document. And we'd love to be able to come and talk about the document itself and share the document at that point too. Okay. And so just to reiterate for people in terms of the process, Carnegie Mellon will be coming back for what is an official development activities meeting. This is a sort of an update meeting at this point. So I would say between now and then, people could look a little bit more closely at the slides using the links that have been put in the chat. We'll also have link to this that's on our website, so people can find that from the design development review section of our website. We all can do a little homework if there are very specific fine-grained things to give you feedback on. Use that email address that you provided so that you'd have some of that feedback even before your development activities meeting. Sure. Excellent. That's kind of what I suggest to everybody in terms of, if this felt fast, or, you were like, oh, some of these ideas are really cool, I need to study them for a little bit longer. I would say definitely go on the website and take a look, because there is a lot there. And please use our webpage and the email link that Jen had showed. Email us. We're happy to come talk to anybody individually or answer any questions. I did see, Wanda, there were 2 questions that just came through here at the end on the chat.
Right.
Do you want me to go ahead? Do you want me to answer those now, or you want to wait and do those? How do you want to do those?
No, you can answer them, but we need to verbalize them. So any plans between South Craig and South Neville?
The only projects that we have identified on between Craig Street and Neville are the 2 that we identified: the north of Forbes site, which is on the graphic arts site, building site, and then across the street from that, between the museum and the railroad on the south of Forbes site. Those are the only projects that we've identified in that area between Craig Street and Neville.
And what recreation facilities may the community use?
So in normal days, when we're not under a pandemic, our campus is freely open to all the community. And so our track, our campus spaces are open for people to walk through, to go to, etc. We do note that, of course, it's a little bit different right now because of the pandemic, but ultimately we think that these connections that we're talking about, the bike connection across campus from 5th Avenue, 5th and Morewood, all the way to Shenley Park, will be an open to the public connection across campus. The Hammerschlag bike drive that will take you from Shenley Park down to the railroad crossing would also be a open to the public bike connection. So we want those connections to be open to the public. We want our campus to be an open experience for not just the campus, but also the community, but also the region.
Bob, there's another question there.
Right. Is there a train from Hazelwood to Carnegie Mellon?
We don't know that. We're not driving that train, so to speak. We are following the lead of the developers, the kind of lead developers down at Hazelwood Green, in developing our building that we have down there right now, and looking at maybe another building in the future. But in regards to connections through the Hollow, we are not driving that. That's not something that we are kind of advancing as part of our master plan. It's not really. It's really kind of a city planning and DOMI initiative more than it is from the Oakland institutions. And to that effect, our connections, we are maintaining our existing connections that we have down to 2nd Avenue via the university shuttle buses that go down through Squirrel Hill, and then ultimately down Greenfield Avenue to get to Hazelwood Green.
And then we have two people who are joining us by phone tonight and may not be able to use the chat feature as a result of that. So if you have a question, there's somebody ending in 1416, somebody ending in 8906. If you'd like to unmute, use *6. And if you want to verbalize a question, you can go ahead. Okay, not hearing any questions from the people on the phone. I think we covered you at least answered the question of your plans related to Hazelwood.
The answer to our question and our plans is we do not have plans regarding a train connection through the hollow.
Right, okay. And then we'll look to see potentially getting you on our schedule for your official development activities meeting. You're requesting October, so we can look at that.
Great, thanks, Wanda.
Okay, thanks so much. I'm checking Facebook just but in between our next that presentation and our next presentation. We did have a question that I don't think I verbalized at the beginning about, what is being done about partying off campus in Oakland, and that's certainly it's been an issue for us in the last week. So I would encourage Oakland residents who are concerned about this issue to come to our Let's Talk and Oak Watch meeting coming up in September, and to call your city council representative in between time of concerns, and also immediate concerns that you have. You can call 911. And if it's a longer term, something that you would just like to report to the city that isn't immediate for that moment, you can use the city's 311 complaint line. And I would encourage residents to use both of those as appropriate as a resource. You can also email your information to Oakwatch at oakwatch@opdc.org, and we'll be, gathering sort of testimonials and information about exact issues that we might want to make sure our university partners send somebody to. If there's a particular address that was problematic, let us know, and we'll make sure that gets reported as well. So I just wanted to respond to that, but definitely get involved with Oak Watch and follow that more closely. It is something that we are working on. It's very, very serious concern right now. Next speaker is PWSA, here to talk about stormwater management. So I'll hand it over now to Rebecca Zito, who can introduce the other members of her team.
Hi, I'm Beth Dutton, and I'm Senior Project Manager at PWSA. I'll be leading the presentation tonight, and I will let Rebecca introduce herself. Oh, Rebecca, you're on mute.
Yeah, always forget that. Hi, I'm Rebecca Zito, the Senior Manager of Public Affairs with the Pittsburgh Water and Sewer Authority, and thank you for having us tonight to provide an update on stormwater management, and I'll turn it back over to Beth.
So this is a very timely presentation with the arrival of Tropical Storm Ida today. Hopefully you've all made preparations and battened down the hatches appropriately. Toward the end of this presentation tonight, we'll provide you with a phone number so that you can contact PWSA if you experience any issues with flooding or basement backups. So we do encourage you to do that. So this evening, we are going to talk to you about PWSA's stormwater story. We're going to tell you why stormwater matters, the problem that PWSA is trying to solve, and PWSA's solution. So stormwater is the #1 pollutant in urban areas, which is why we're taking the time this evening to talk to you about it. We want a city that's protected from the impacts of stormwater and the wet weather challenges that we experience in Pittsburgh. We have found out from other cities' experience that by better managing stormwater, we can reduce the amount of sewage and pollution entering our rivers, which is a public health win for us and our neighbors downstream as well. We can work toward having fewer homes with flooded basements, which is an improvement for health and safety of residents. And we can become a more livable city by using green infrastructure to bring environmental and community improvements to Pittsburgh neighborhoods. So tonight we're going to talk to you about the stormwater challenges that we experience, what we're doing to address them, and describe why the stormwater fee is an equitable way to help. So most regions across the country are experiencing increasing amounts of rain, as you've witnessed. The Northeast and Pittsburgh have seen the greatest impact, with 71% increase measured between 1958 and 2012. So as we've seen from the past few years, this is only going to get worse. Next slide, please. So Pittsburgh averages about 38 inches of rain a year, which would be manageable if it were spread out evenly over 365 days. But with more severe storms that dump a lot of rain quickly, and with so much concrete and so much of our city paved over, that rain needs somewhere to go. Our system simply doesn't have the capacity to handle these large storms. So next slide, please. So this graph shows that occurrences of severe storm events have indeed increased dramatically in Allegheny County from when the 1950s, when there were approximately 12 severe storms, to the 2010s when there were 120. So this is an increase of about 900%. And these severe storms are defined by NOAA as events with wind, thunderstorm, hail, and tornadoes. So next slide, please. So stormwater often combines with sanitary sewer water, which is what we flush from our toilets and goes down the drain, and it combines in our sewers. So if the sewer system gets overwhelmed, instead of sending the sewage to the treatment plant to be treated, the system dumps it into the rivers and waterways. Or it can back up into people's basements. So billions of gallons of sewage overflow each year into our rivers and waterways. And it doesn't take much to overflow the system. It can happen with just 1/10 of an inch of rainfall or less. Next slide, please. So as I noted earlier, our system was not built for this volume of stormwater. We have more pavement and hard surfaces than we did 100 years ago. And we have more rain and localized severe storms that the system needs to handle. So approximately 1/4 of PWSA's 1,200 miles of sewers are still in use today. And these were in the ground by 1908. So as you can see, we're dealing with a very aged system. Next slide, please. So to tackle our stormwater challenges, PWSA is going to build an innovative stormwater management system that keeps as much stormwater as possible out of our sewers during storms, so that when it rains, we don't have basements backing up with raw sewage. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, this is one of PWSA's green infrastructure projects. This is Center and Heron. And this is going to transform stormwater management in the city with projects like this. This project was installed several years ago, and it manages about 1 million gallons of stormwater per year. And this captures and holds it back, the runoff, before it causes a sewer overflow into the river. And in addition to this, it's a nice amenity for the neighborhood, and it helps beautify the neighborhood. So as I stated, PWSA is building a system that keeps as much of the stormwater as possible out of our sewers when it rains. And one of the ways we're doing this is by building green infrastructure such as Center and Heron, which will absorb and slow down and help hold back sewer overflows and the flow of water. So green infrastructure, it uses solutions that mimic nature. And when we combine it with traditional stormwater solutions like underground storage and our catch basins and culverts, we can use this holistic approach to address our region's stormwater problems in the most affordable and effective way possible. So to date, PWSA has constructed about 13 green infrastructure projects throughout Pittsburgh. And Sawmill Run and Whiteman Park were completed last year. And construction has recently started on the second phase of the Whiteman Park project in Squirrel Hill. We're also starting construction on projects in Shadyside, 4 Mile Run, and North Point Breeze. So in addition to this, several more projects are also currently in design. So with the concerns about building green infrastructure, better managing stormwater, and reducing sewer overflows, we'll need an additional revenue source to help make this all happen. So a stormwater fee, if approved, will help fund these projects and other stormwater initiatives. This is a smart investment that will help to improve our management of stormwater and reduce flooding issues. Prevention of these kinds of problems is a more cost-effective way of dealing with these problems. So before it becomes a crisis. So to change how we manage stormwater, we're also going to change how we bill for stormwater. So currently, PWSA charges every customer based on how much drinking water they use. That meter reading determines both the drinking water and the wastewater rates. But this is not an equitable way to charge for stormwater because it considers the amount of water used rather than the amount of stormwater generated by a property. So starting in 2022, stormwater will be billed differently, and this is pending PUC approval. So every parcel in Pittsburgh has been mapped, and even if a parcel has no water meter, it will be eligible to pay a stormwater bill to PWSA, provided that it has greater than 400 square feet of impervious area. And as I noted, this will be a more fair and equitable way of billing than meter usage. So the fee is a smart investment. And if we don't improve our stormwater management system, these flooding issues that we've been experiencing will only get worse. So every property owner will pay an amount that is proportional to the amount of impervious surface on their property. So I'll go into this in the next slide. So the stormwater fee is based on the amount of impervious surface on a property, as I noted previously. And impervious surface is the hard surface on a property, such as roofs, sidewalks, and parking areas that don't absorb stormwater. These hard surfaces generate stormwater runoff that collects trash and sends polluted water into our local waterways. So this water can also overwhelm our sewer system and cause the streets to flood and basements to back up and sewage to overflow into the local rivers and streams. In Pittsburgh, the average amount of impervious surface on a property is approximately 1,650 square feet. And this is equal to one equivalent residential unit, or ERU, of impervious surface. And this ERU is the unit of measure for calculating the stormwater fee and is accepted as the industry standard for determining a stormwater fee. So as you can see here, we've determined 3 tiers for residential properties in the city of Pittsburgh. and these are based on a range of sizes of those properties. Tier 1 is 400 square feet to just over 1,000. And again, this is square feet as measured as impervious surface. Tier 2 is about 1,000 square feet to about 2,700 square feet. And it's this tier 2 where over 70% of Pittsburgh residential properties lay. And this is the base rate, or as I noted before, the ERU. And the largest tier is tier 3. And those are those larger properties that are over 2,700 square feet. Next slide, please. So we took to heart the need for equity in the fee. And as I noted before, because we realized that the properties are different sizes, we have these 3 tiers. And the tiers are broken down in different monthly rates. For our first year, that will be 2022 for the stormwater fee when it will be implemented. And for the 1 ERU, that's tier 2, the monthly rate will be $5.96 for residential properties. And in 2023, that rate will be $7.95. So rates for non-residential customers, such as hospitals, the city, universities, commercial properties, they'll also use this ERU model to determine their rates. And so for this purpose, 1 ERU is the equivalent of 1,650 square feet. So for example, if a parking lot is the size of 10 ERUs, the parking lot's monthly stormwater bill will be $59.60, provided that the rates that we proposed are approved by the PUC. So next slide, please. So we just wanted to show you where our proposed rates puts us in comparison to our peers. So all stormwater programs are different, and they all have different needs and different priorities. They have different operational infrastructure, climate, and funding challenges. And locally and nationally, these fees vary significantly. So you can see when you compare Pittsburgh's 2022 and 2023 fee, it puts us right about in the middle of the pack for comparable metropolitan areas. And we also compared PWSA's fee with some of our more local peers. So the 2022 fee puts us toward the bottom, just above Plum Borough. And in 2023, when that rate goes up a little bit more, it puts us right about in the middle of the pack. So next slide, please. So the payoff for better managing stormwater through additional revenues will be fewer basement backups, less pollution, and a healthier and a better Pittsburgh. So by changing how PWSA charges for stormwater, we can over time improve how we manage stormwater and provide multiple benefits. And as I stated, this is over time. We didn't get into this situation overnight, so it will take time to address these in a very systematic way. And I'll talk about that in a minute, how we're going to approach that. So as I noted before, the multiple benefits, they include a significant reduction in the amount of sewage and pollution entering our rivers, which is a public health win for us and our neighbors downstream, fewer homes with flooded basements, less money needed for costly emergency flood repairs. It'll make Pittsburgh more attractive to residents and newcomers and businesses. It'll make better use of our waterfront and use of our rivers for recreational purposes, which is getting more and more common with kayaking and boating. And this is a boon to our community, but this will only succeed if our rivers are clean. So this is a funding mechanism that is truly equitable and which everyone pays their fair share for managing stormwater. So now what I'd like to talk a little bit about is PWSA's stormwater master planning effort. This effort will build off of PWSA's Green First Plan, which some of you are probably familiar with. And the Green First Plan was developed in 2016. Since that time, Alcosan is moving forward with their clean water plan, which includes building tunnels to capture flow and reduce sewer overflows. And we have also had a couple of the rainiest years in the history of Allegheny County, and this was 2018 and 2019. And this experience has highlighted the need to update our stormwater management plan. So this plan is going to serve as Pittsburgh's blueprint to address local stormwater challenges. Our master planning effort was kicked off this spring, and the project team is being led by Penn Praxis and the Water Center at the University of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the final plan will be complete in June of 2022. There'll be a public engagement of a diverse group of, oh, I see there's a typo on the slide. The final plan is in 2022, next year. The public engagement will include a diverse group of residents, ratepayers, and stakeholders through meetings with established community organizations that can then convey the community issues and needs. So we are going to pay special attention to those that are most impacted by stormwater issues, such as flooding and basement backups, and also identify environmental justice areas. So more information is available on our stormwater master plan, and you can access the FAQs at the link below. Becca, if you wouldn't mind putting that link in the chat. And we can also make this presentation available, a PDF of it, to the folks that are attending tonight. So as I stated before, we really appreciate information on how our system is responding to wet weather events. And if you could call PWSA's emergency dispatch number at the number provided, and let us know that you're experiencing basement backups or flooding issues. Of course, if it's serious flooding, please make sure you're safe first, and call 911, and then call PWSA. And then you can also use the city's 311 system, or use the MyBurg app, and we provide the link for that as well. So we have a website for our stormwater program, and you can access it at this link, and it provides more information. This will be updated as time goes on and we get closer to the implementation of the stormwater fee. And next slide, please. So that wraps up what we have to present to you tonight. So we welcome any questions and comments that you might have. We appreciate our customers and your feedback. So, and also if you have additional questions or comments after this evening that occur to you, I've provided my contact information here for you. So
do you have any information on projects being planned for Oakland? There's a stormwater management improvement project that had been planned for Ophelia Street in the Oak Cliff section of South Oakland. Do you have any updates on that?
That is the Parklet project at Lawn and Ophelia, and that is currently under design. We are moving forward with the design for that. As far as I know, I can get back to you with an update on that project. And
yeah, I think people like maybe some information on schedule or what you know, any updates, kind of where that is, when it might be ready to come to the community, if we could see anything, and we could even post it on our website or that kind of thing, so.
Sure, be happy to provide you with that.
Great.
Yep.
do you know offhand if it's in design, like just a general time frame? I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you happen to know anything now, I'm sure people would be interested in here.
I did read the progress report for that, several weeks ago, but, we have quite a few projects.
There's a lot of projects.
Yeah, but it's very easy information for us to gather up and send on to you.
Okay, yeah, if you could do that for anybody listening who, is really wanting to get some updated information, as soon as we have it, we'll put it on our website and we'll let folks know at community meetings, and even at, our next meeting of this Oakland-Wide meeting, we can let people know that it's there on the website for people to take a look at. So that'd be great. I'm not seeing a lot of other questions. I know that would be one. So I would say if there is anybody, who's phone only, who would like to unmute and ask a question, you could do that now. Looks like we only have one.
I did see a question come up. The question is, are there any incentives for property owners to reduce their stormwater fee?
Right, but I was giving the person on the phone the moment to verbalize the question, and then I'll get back to that one. So go ahead, person on the phone ending in 1416.
Yes, this is Elena Zaitzoff. I'm the Vice President of the Oak Cliff Community Organization. I just want to say that I think I have maybe an update on the Monophilia project. I went onto the website, and it says that it's planned for 2022. Now, earlier this year, the PWSA folks came to an Oak Cliff meeting, and we were told that it was going to be done this year. So my first question is, why is it being put off again? A few years ago, we were told that we were going to be the first one, and now some other ones have been completed. And now tonight I learned that some other ones are going to be completed before ours is even started. So why is ours being put off again?
I think from what I've heard a little bit of, and I don't have all the details on it, but there is some coordination that we need to do with the city, and so that's just taking a little bit more time than we anticipated. It is still being designed, and we are still planning to move forward with it, but there is a little bit more coordination that's necessary.
And which city department is that?
Gosh, I'm not positive which department it is, so I would have to get back. Well, if we can get back to you with that information.
Okay, and the second part of my question is, when we do get it, have the plans changed again from what we were last shown? I believe it was in February, because the plans had changed then from what we were originally shown a few years ago. And I know it says it's 90% designed. So are we going, and the plans didn't change in a good way. We got less of a park, and it was not as, the plantings were not as nice. So are we going to be disappointed again when we see a design?
We would have to go back and look at that. I don't think that there have been significant changes.
Well,
But
significant to you and significant to us could be, different.
I understand. And yes, so we can go back and get those updates for you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And then I do see a question, does PWSA provide incentives for property owners to implement improvements?
Yes, we do. We're currently providing a stormwater fee credit manual, and there will be credits and incentives available to both residential property owners and commercial property owners. So if you, for example, if you're able to install a rain garden or disconnect some downspouts, you'll be able to get a discount on your stormwater fee.
Well, thanks very much for presenting tonight, and really explaining how the fee will work, and in I think ways that people can understand how you came up with it and everything. So, so thanks very much for your presentation. It was very helpful.
Okay, sure.
All right, everybody stand up and stretch. And we have one more presentation. So I'm going to introduce John Kralicki from UPMC to introduce his team. And we'll have a presentation on the bed tower on 5th Avenue at Presby. Hi, John.
Hey, Wanda, thank you very much. And good evening to everybody. We're going to try to be very comprehensive but brief, knowing that, the time's getting late, but we're really excited. And on behalf of our UPMC Presbyterian Shadyside administration, we're excited to kick off this presentation here and give a community update for our new bed tower on the site of the old Children's Hospital. And we have our architects here, and I'm going to turn it over to Mike Schlesler, who is our project director for the project, and he'll go over the agenda here, and then we'll definitely take questions at the end.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks, Wanda. We're going to start by just doing a brief description of the project to ground everyone in what it is we're doing. I think we presented this once to you in the past, a couple of years ago, so we just want to bring that back to the forefront. We'll go through our timeline. We'll review how this project aligns with the IMP. We'll show some project imagery, review site concepts and flows, try to describe the building and its components. We'll talk about some of the community benefits related to the project, some opportunities for the neighborhood and for neighboring businesses, and then we'll talk about construction impacts at the end. I'll turn it over to Kurt Spearing with HGA to kind of walk us through the project.
Thank you, Mike. I'm going to give a brief introduction and I'll be joined by Brian Cannon. So Brian will join in here just shortly. So just the scope of the project is 633 private beds. They're all universal patient rooms with disease-specific units to help replace some of the all the semi-private beds that are in the current existing Presbyterian tower. Current codes really do mandate private rooms, and so we're really just we're meeting that need and the demand for state-of-the-art beds here in Oakland. It also includes a 450-car parking garage, which is part of the overall building, but not self-evident from the street, which is used to help majority of the demand for the inpatient units that are included in the tower itself. And then we do have outdoor parks or green spaces and amenities that Brian will go through in a minute to help create buffers between the community and the building itself. From a wayfinding perspective, we have 3 different portals of entry. There's, if you look up at the top on O'Hara Street, there's an entrance A, which is really an entrance that is basically used by the community, which accesses Terrace Street. But our primary entry portals are down 5th, which has the inpatient entrance, which is off of Atwood Street, what we're calling the ambulatory or outpatient entry, and emergency department entrance, which is along Lothrop, and then an intended more post-acute and outpatient entry along Darrow Street. Again, all of them access off 5th Avenue and off Terrace primarily, and those create the circulation paths across the campus. Next slide. Project timeline. Mike, are you taking this or Brian? Okay.
Yeah, I'll take it. Thank you. And so it feels like we've been in design for a long time, but really it's been master plan refinement. So only just recently did we get started into the meat of design. We've just started our design meetings with our internal users, and we're going through a series of community engagement meetings, which this one is. We're hoping to do those throughout the balance of the summer and the fall, which would get us to zoning in March of next year. And then as certain design packages would continue to progress, we'd have earlier ones that would allow us to begin construction as early as next summer. We're anticipating 4 years of construction, and then in order to activate the building, that would take us to about the fall of 26. I would say, similar to the gentleman from CMU, we would like to come back for an official development activities meeting in October. So hopefully this can serve as a good introduction to the project, and then we can be more thorough in a future meeting and respond to any questions we aren't able to answer today. Doug Spies, next slide.
Thank you, Mike. You can advance the slide. So we've been in front of this group as well as City Council as we work through our institutional master plan. In essence, what we're showing is we are meeting the requirements of the IMP. As Kurt mentioned, 450 parking spaces is what we were approved for. We are under 900,000 square feet, and we are less than 300 feet above Fifth Avenue. We are not exceeding the 17 stories, and the setbacks from Fifth Avenue we're maintaining at a minimum of 20 feet. Next slide. As you can see, the building itself has evolved over time. You know, initially we went in with kind of what was the maximum footprint that we would occupy on the site. And the benefit of this design, which you'll see and what we presented before, is really a much more refined, streamlined master plan. In 2014, we came back and it really became more of a bar building with an addition to the South Tower. And now that has morphed into a much more elegant appendage of the campus. And then also that allows us to open up those opportunities for green space and a more of a public realm, as Brian mentioned. Next.
Let's, hello, I'm Brian Cannon. We'll try to go quickly. I'm going to set the stage for the context. This new tower is taking its place in a really interesting collection of sort of dramatic and iconic towers in the immediate vicinity. The following slide, next. In addition, there's a really beautiful pattern of limestone architecture at the street level, a lot of vertical emphasis, really beautiful detailing, and we're picking up on that quite literally in the design of this building so that it feels like it's contributing to the primary character of Fifth Avenue. The next slide looks at one of the key attributes that we've tried quite hard to take advantage of, which is a sense of quite serious urban buildings set in a really beautiful park-like landscape. The next slide tells a little bit of a story of how we've been able to sort of excavate some of the old history of the site. The image on the far left shows a concept for the Presbyterian Hospital with its original kind of great embracing arms, defining the end of a large entry forecourt. The middle images show some of the feeling of how earlier in the century, Old Presby sat on the hill in a kind of park-like hilly landscape. And the image on the right shows what we're attempting to accomplish by carving out the center of the site, creating tiered gardens, one right down at Fifth Avenue and one up above the raised parking level, which reintroduces a significant amount of green space and also creates really wonderful amenities both for the community and for the patient population living and working in the hospital. Next slide looks at some other recent developments in the neighborhood right around there. A significant amount of bold and interesting architecture. To accomplish a building of this scale, we're actually aiming for similar degree of boldness, but a great deal of simplicity, kind of clean, elegant forms that to the greatest extent possible fit in comfortably and don't create a lot of visual excess. The next slide begins to look at, here's our site, which Doug described, an open, formerly the site of Children's Hospital, currently an open hillside. Pitt's School of Public Health on the right, and the tall tower at the far left is UPMC's BST tower. The next slide shows our building inserted into this setting with the public health building in the foreground on the right. The sort of gentle billowing curve of this building comes about because, as you saw in the site plans, the overall plan is just very gently kinked inward. It gives us greater length from end to end to house all the bed patient bedrooms that we need to accommodate. And it also helps to make the overall form of this building soft and gentle and kind of interesting as the sunlight hits it throughout the day. The patterns won't be static. It'll be a kind of gently alive facade with a lot of different interesting variation throughout the day and a relatively crisp articulation right at the sort of dramatic Fifth Avenue entrance. Next slide looks from the opposite direction. We've seen a version of this. Here we're looking north back to the old Presby Tower and our entry garden at the ground level and elevated garden above the garage. The next slide gives you a sense, under 300 feet tall, just about 590 feet north to south. The base of the building, 39 feet tall, aligns with the existing entrance to Presbyterian Hospital up the hill. So conceptually, this project is one kind of base experience that is more immediately related to the public realm and accessible to the city. And above that sits the more private world of the patient care bed tower and its associated amenities. The next slide looks at the view on Fifth Avenue looking east. This building, the bulk of the building is inserted longwise into the depth of the UPMC property, though. So it's a big building. It's, we believe, sort of nicely surrounded by serious context buildings. So the scale is not actually overwhelming. It's sort of comfortably bracketed by surrounding buildings as well. The next slide looks at our entry garden. We have a cantilever right at the corner of Fifth Avenue and DeSoto Street. This opens up the corner of the property so that views around the corner and into the park space that we've been describing are considerably more generous and not constrained. If you look at the next slide, you'll see coming sort of looking north and west right at that DeSoto intersection, you can see how the cantilever significantly opens up the public space. So as you're traveling on Fifth Avenue, the garden space that is part of the project is open and accessible to the public. And we've created a more generous public plaza space right at the corner of what is a very active and busy urban pedestrian scene. Keep going, one more. This is a look at the building, in the evening hours, which helps give you a sense of how the interior of the base 3 floors of the building relates to the street. These are the spaces that we describe as the lifestyle village. They're support functions, dining, places where families and staff can get a little direct connection to the city, respite from the sort of demanding experiences of caring for their patients on the upper floors, but also giving the community a strong connection to the facility inside, including what we hope are a significant number of retail and commercial opportunities that will be directly relevant to life in Oakland. The next slide looks at one of the things that the sort of gently sinuous base that curves around the front of the building accomplishes is a 3-story connective lobby, which disguises the 3 stories of parking above grade. So from the street, you have no sense of a significant parking structure on this property, and we'll be putting landscape and sort of manageable ornamental trees of modest scale up on the top of that. And this section doesn't show it, but there are also 3 levels of parking below grade, which are support the valet parking operations. Next slide looks at halfway up the hill, if you head up DeSoto Street to the existing primary entrance of Presbyterian Hospital is what we now call the north entrance. It serves the outpatient population coming to Presby and to a lesser degree to our new tower. It lightens the traffic burden at the main entrance down on Fifth Avenue and gives a really direct connection for patients heading to outpatient procedures. And as you can see, it has a nice open aperture onto the raised garden above the parking structure. So as you travel through this space, you get a really beautiful glimpse of the landscape beyond it. The next slide looks at how that space, this elevated garden above the parking structure, might be developed with the possibility of both use by the hospital population, but also controlled public access for special events, which will make it a pretty great neighborhood amenity in Oakland. And immediately adjacent to this level is the major Presbyterian Hospital cafeteria, which affords people a really wonderful opportunity to get lunch and go out into this garden space during breaks. Let's keep going. And I think we'll describe the flows in greater detail.
Yeah, just briefly, I mentioned those flows and the different inpatient, outpatient, and the third entry, which is post-acute and outpatient entry as well. From standpoint of entrances, there are 3 entries that come off of the Fifth and Falk, sort of Atwood entry, which are the new main entry, a staff entrance, and connection to the main hospital from Falk, and then the Falk entrance, which enters underneath a canopy, which currently exists and would be maintained. We have the secondary north entry that we mentioned for outpatients and outpatient services, and then we are relocating the old main entry. It becomes the emergency department entry in the long-term master plan. There are points of entrance for parking. The Victoria building garage becomes a accessory or accessible parking in addition to the underground parking for the outpatient entrance and outpatient services for easy access as well. And then the Montefiore garage will be used for Montefiore Hospital as it is now, and primarily staff will be parking in the Presby garage because the entrances, public entries, will matriculate down to the south and use the underground parking associated with the building and Victoria garages themselves. Next slide. When we look at the inpatient or the main entry, there's a public drop-off, which is really short-term drop-off of parking for patients and pickup, because the valet parking is shown here in the blue, which is actually inside the parking garage. So parkers that are valet parking will continue past the drop-off entry and pull their cars into these blue drop-off spaces and enter into that vestibule that Brian just previously showed you as part of our main entry sequence. This assures us, because we're splitting the parking valet from pickup and drop-off, that we, by parking count and by study, we will not be backing parking up onto Fifth Avenue in any sequence or at any time during the day. And then parking for Falk is as it is now off the same entrance, and parking under the canopy and driving through to a valet drop-off and pickup sequence as it currently exists. Next slide. Brian, you want to describe some of the landscape?
Sure. This illustrative landscape plan looks at all levels of the landscape in the same view. So down at the corner of Fifth and DeSoto, we have a sort of more urban public plaza, which might be useful for public events, little concerts, possibly farmers market space. Behind the existing bus rapid transit shelter, there's an entry garden, which will have additional waiting space. It's a buffer zone that creates a really great experience on Fifth Avenue and also protects Fifth Avenue from the sense of traffic arrival into the hospital. We'll have a water feature that separates the passing travel zones from the drop-off, and then vehicles will enter into the parking structure underneath this elevated terrace up at the upper level, which relates both to the food service inside and to the north outpatient entry, which we described up here. And this diagram doesn't quite show it, but the aperture that allows service and occasional public access into that space is in the northwest corner of that garden space. So this is going to manage all of the on-site stormwater management requirements of the site quite beautifully. It does a wonderful job of creating useful recreation and respite spaces for the users and the community. And it also offers us enough acreage that we can offer some really wonderful public amenities as they evolve. And we'll go now. Brian, there's a question in chat that we can answer as we go through some of the renderings again. The question was that describe how an all glass building relates to the surrounding community context and some of the stone. I think you described it briefly, but as we go through it again, please make sure you touch on that as part of the actual architectural response. Okay. When we look at the functional components, we talked about the parking deck, the 450 cars that is both below grade and then somewhat above grade that's underneath the landscape terrace and has the sort of clip-on frontispiece for the lobby and waiting. Next slide. Shows the lobby in front and the lifestyle village that Brian mentioned with the public amenities. You know, the idea is that this bottom space is really supposed to be welcoming the community. We don't really want to create a fortress on this site that would not be welcoming for the public, but at the same time, as we move up in the building, we need to create that sense of privacy that you might want for your own healthcare experience. But we want to make this lower level area immediately accessible and welcoming to the community, because that's where they'll be accessing it on the greatest level, which is at the street level where all the activity is. The next slide is the sky lobby. Because most of Presbyterian is up this large hill, we're actually up about 4 stories from the 5th Avenue site to the actual roadway that passes through the 1 block away that passes under the ED and current main entrance. We're using that as the sky lobby. That will be the primary connection between Old Presbyterian and between our new building for clinical services and for public. So 1 level above the ED and mold main entrance is that sky lobby, which connects both buildings in a very, very public way. That also walks past and views over the terraces and the green space that we have down below on grade. And then the inpatient floors above will then be repetitive inpatient floors that are designed for specialty units but have a commonality. And I would just make one comment. This is even though the building appears to be very sinuous and in some ways very design oriented, it's a very rational floor plan. It has space where we need it for supplies and storage within the units, and it removes that space in the center of the building where we have public access and elevator cores where we don't need as much support space. So I want to make it very clear that this is a very rational, very logical floor plan that evolves into, you know, something that is quite elegant and quite simple. And then the penthouse then above, which is integrated, it's actually a screen that screens the mechanical units that are open above. For the most part, we have it's a portion of closed and open space. The penthouse is also designed to facilitate helicopter travel, which is not changing, which is on the old Presby roof, and so it allows that helicopter to access the building in its current flight path. Brian, maybe before John goes to community, you wanted to speak to the glassy top and the stone bottom and why that combination makes sense for us as architects and why for the community they would want to understand how we came to that conclusion.
Sure, if that's okay, Wanda, can we fire away?
Yeah, sure.
One of the primary programmatic drivers of the skin selection, of course, is how the building serves the patient population inside. There's a significant amount of research that tells us that patient recovery is improved by access to views and natural light. So we're trying to optimize that experience. With respect to the exterior, a building of this size in glass can take on a lot of the character of the neighborhood by picking up the colors and light patterns that change throughout the day. So it's a little bit chameleon-like in that colors and reflections from surrounding buildings will actually show up quite significantly throughout the day in the way the glass changes over time. It's a decision that, you know, a building of this bulk, we believe takes on the lightest visual weight in glass. A heavy masonry building will in fact appear bulkier and heavier simply because it's matte, opaque. The quality of light is a little bit less sparkly, and overall it appears heavy. So from the standpoint of fitting in comfortably. We're looking for a kind of simple, elegant expression that has a sort of minimal impact by virtue of its clarity and cleanliness as much as anything, and the what we believe is the relative lightness of a glass facade, given its bulk. And of course, the masonry base of the building that we've described, which is 30 feet tall, related quite directly to the height of the surrounding buildings, is an explicit and I think really recognizable visual connection to the surrounding limestone buildings of roughly similar height. I think, you know, frankly, the gardens are also going to carry a heavy burden of connectedness, because they'll really make the whole complex feel directly related to the way surrounding buildings have been developed over time, with significant tree planting and landscape at the same general scale.
Thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. So, you know, since we're running a little late, I'm going to go through some of these community benefits. I know we have our next meeting, we can go in a little more in depth, but I want to hit on some that are a little bit more specific to Oakland. But as you guys know, UPMC is the largest employer and the non-governmental employer in the state of Pennsylvania. We contribute $1.7 billion in community benefits in 2020. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, we give $599 million to the medical research that's happening with our, with our partnership with Pitt. We also have a lot of different charitable contributions and wellness programs, community health. And then we also, there are no kind of like county hospitals or hospitals that are really for the people that are uninsured. So we do have a lot of money that we give to people that can't pay for healthcare, which is, around $121 million. Next slide. These just go through the different impacts with the different hospitals in Oakland. So McGee Women's Hospital actually has an impact to the region of $1.6 billion, similar to what you saw from CMU and what they do and their impact to the region. Next slide. Presbyterian Shadyside actually is $4.7 billion, along with Western Psychiatric Hospital, economic impact to the region. Next. Community engagement, this was really a big time where when we were in the height of COVID, last year, and then the vaccine came out, we really worked really hard with a lot of people and gave over 80,000 doses to different areas locally. We exceeded that number across the state, but that's more locally. And we really partnered with different organizations in school in the Hill District with Chatham and different groups and Health Unity and the Islamic Center, and really made sure that we were working with everybody to make sure the vaccine was available and we could do those doses. And to this day, we are still hosting vaccine clinics around the region. Next slide. Wanda started the meeting out with this, and we're a big supporter of UPMC's affordable housing. The Community Land Trust has been probably, it's been a great success, and it's really getting a lot of momentum. That's great for us. We're a neighbor. Oakland is our neighborhood, and we would love for our employees to be living in Oakland and not just be, a lot of developers gobbling up the housing so they can provide housing for students. So, been really a great project, and we support it 100%, and have given quite a bit of money to make that happen. The other thing too is we just recently, at no cost to Presbyterian Senior Care, gave a parcel of land that's on Forbes and Craft for more affordable housing. It's for senior care for the LGBTQ community. Actually, this is going to be only one of its kind, the first of its kind in Western Pennsylvania, only a few in the nation. So really excited about that project moving forward too. Next slide. I mentioned about the Oakland Land Trust, we supported it. You know, I think in past meetings, some community members have asked about, well, what have you done for the community? You know, between what we have loaned OPDC for the land trust with 0 interest, or have been a guarantor on one of their projects up by Trees Hall, it's in the amount of about $862,000. Next slide. Another thing we really do too is, from a local perspective, is we support. We just had our had our charity golf outing last Friday. It supports 2 local communities. It's the CHS Oakland Food Pantry and People's Oakland. And we have been able, over the 11 years that we've been having this out, and you know, we grossed over $1 million, but we've had 600,000 of that go back to these 2 charities. And the food bank, you know, it serves 850 families, unfortunately, in Oakland. But they tell us that we fund their food pantry for 4 months out of the year. And then People's Oakland is another great organization in Oakland that really helps people with psychiatric issues that get discharged, really get assimilated back into the community. Next slide. Another thing we did just recently, which is awesome, and what I'm hoping to do is kind of duplicate this in part of the lifestyle village, is what we call Argyle Studio. It's really a way for other vendors to come in that can't afford Oakland because the rent is so high, to really come in, not have to sacrifice a portion of their sales, get started. And we have 5 or 6 different vendors in that space that are selling their wares. And it's just awesome if you haven't been there. It's on Forbes Avenue in the Iroquois building. And we provided that space rent-free for this project, working with a bunch of people to make that happen. Next slide. Another thing we did too is the new bus station that's on Atwood. We worked with the Port Authority. We gave them an easement so the project could be built. And not only did we do that, that's like the front of our hospital. So we also agreed with the Port Authority that we would make sure that we would clean the bus station, keep it looking good, and also perform some minor maintenance. Next slide. And then the opportunities, you know, obviously we are always looking to hire. It's really a tough market right now with a lot of the open positions we have, and we're looking to do that. Also, we do a lot with people of color. Nearly 25% of those hired are people of color, and we're working, you know, to do even better. And then we also are, you know, really open to all different types of business relationships, you know, through our supply chain. We had a diverse spend of $246 million in 2020. Next slide. Opportunities for employment. We're hiring. If you know people, send them our way. Every single position we have, we need to hire. So really looking at that. We're also going to be hosting some job fairs and working with different groups too, especially for the building of the facility. Would love to be able to see, you know, not everybody has to go to college. We have the trades is a great opportunity, not only for the building of this facility, but also for the ability for us to go ahead and maintain the facility when we're done. And then other opportunities too are working on obviously diversity, equity, and inclusion for everything that we do. And like we said, we're hosting the job fairs and really looking at all different disadvantaged businesses and different people to be able to be part of this project. Next slide. This project is transformational for us. You know, we are going to be, you know, people are wondering like, oh my God, you're adding all these beds. We're actually not adding any beds. We're just making them 100% private. And, you know, people travel from all over the world to seek care, you know, here in Pittsburgh, which is amazing that we have it in our backyard. So we just want the care that we provide to have the building that we need. Presbyterian is approaching 90 years old. We have a lot of semi-private rooms, and we're really looking forward to be able to provide 100% private rooms and have the state-of-the-art care that will fit what this region needs. Next slide. Art is another big thing. I sit on a couple of groups here, and we have actually integrated. We hired a public art consultant. We think that's really important in this from a healing perspective, but also not only from a healing, but just in Oakland itself. And we have some great opportunities here that we're going to work with local artists really to bring and make this place a place that people, like we said, could be engaged and come inside and really enjoy the facility from different aspects. And we have committed funds in this project to do that. Again, traffic's important to us. We are not adding staff. We are not adding beds, but what we are doing is modernizing the footprint to be able to fit what we need today to go 100% private. So, you know, one of the key things we told our architects and our traffic consultant was we do not want any traffic ever backing up onto Fifth Avenue. And they're guaranteeing us that that will not happen. Next slide. And I just want to say thank you. You know, this was a difficult year. It still is a difficult year for us. Our staff are exhausted. They've worked extremely hard, but thanks to you and what you did for the healthcare community in this region has been amazing. So here's just a few names of the people that were there. We had the mayor come out, and that's our president of the hospital, John and Sunny. We had the parade, and I can't tell you how uplifting that was for us to have that happen at that time, because, you know, people were just so scared seeing other people die. It was a tough time, and you know, we're getting through this together, and just wanted to say thank you. Then I'll turn that over to who's next.
I think we can go through, this includes a look at some of the specific spaces within the base of the building that we hope to be useful as community resources. The next slide is the ground level view of the what we call the lifestyle village, the public facing spaces at the tip of the building with dining and coffee that's equally accessible from the street or the building above, as well as an education center that we hope will be both a community resource and a facility center. Moving up one level, we expect degree of more privacy, retail, gift shop, and art exhibit space overlooking this at the second floor level, overlooking the street, which should be a really wonderful community contribution. And the top level, you see somewhat more private hospital-based spaces still connected by overlook to the street, a fitness center, spiritual center, and a place for families to get away in a dedicated respite zone. Keep going. And this is one floor above that, the large hospital cafeteria overlooking the garden terrace. And I believe that's the full summary of spaces. Yes.
Thanks, Brian. So I'll go through and try to elaborate a little bit on what we're expecting during construction. Again, I mentioned earlier in the schedule, we have a 4-year construction duration estimated at this time. Green paths showing along Forbes and Fifth Avenue indicate how we intend to get construction vehicles to the site. Yellow lines represent how we intend to get construction vehicles away from the site. The black strips represent streets that we consider to be off limits, and the red line represents a path of access to the construction site that we are working very hard to limit, if not eliminate. But we do need to access that northern half of the site, and so that's still a work in progress. Next slide. Just looking at the building site without the building on it, it is a very tight site. It's difficult to work on. It will require long-term lane closures along DeSoto Avenue, which is shown top to bottom on the right side of the image. We would look to have a multi-lane closure reserving a single lane of traffic northbound that would maintain access to our emergency department from Fifth Avenue. We would have a single lane closure along Fifth Avenue east-west to get vehicles, construction vehicles safely into the site. We worked already with Port Authority and DOMI. We are still working with them and in discussion about these issues, but we have every intention to keep the bus stop at Atwood open and operational during construction. But in order to safely get to that bus stop or move pedestrian traffic east and west down Fifth Avenue, there would be a required pedestrian detour shown in yellow that would take you where the DeSoto intersection is south across to the southern half of Fifth Avenue, and then down 2 blocks to the next intersection where you could again cross back over as needed. Next slide, please. If you have the interest to do so, the next few slides are similar and have a QR code in the top left corner. If you take your phone and open your camera and just kind of focus on that, it should prompt you to open something up that's a bit more interactive. You can kind of change the view for these different images that I have screenshots of below and get a more real-time perspective of what these lane closures and protective barriers might look like. At the bottom left, we're looking east down Fifth Avenue at the construction really exit, and then just in front of the bus stop. On the bottom right image, we're looking west down Fifth Avenue, where kind of the same direction of travel for the one-way on Fifth Avenue, where the buses will be pulling in just after our barrier. Next slide. Further down Fifth Avenue, now looking west at where the construction entrance would be, is the bottom left entrance. DeSoto would be on your right. And then looking up DeSoto on the bottom right image, where we said we would maintain that single lane of traffic northbound. Next image. From Myron and Atwood, looking towards the construction site are the images on the bottom left and bottom right. Next slide. Focused on the Falk building and the entry sequence there and the valet operation that happens. I know a lot of people from Pittsburgh and Oakland specifically frequent the site. It's very busy. We are maintaining access to that from Lothrop Street for the duration of construction. We're also planning a way for pedestrian access from the bus stop along Fifth Avenue to get back to the building without having to walk around the block. Next slide. A different perspective, just kind of looking back south at that same valet operation, and then you can kind of see the pedestrians walking alongside the building, making their way back to both the connection to Presbyterian and the connection to Falk. Next slide. To talk briefly about, I think, what Brian or Kurt had mentioned earlier, the building has been designed in a way to maintain the existing helicopter path in its permanent configuration. Next slide. Just a more artistic representation of that same concept. Next slide. We are, currently we have 2 PennDOT designated flight paths that are approved for the helistop at the site. Next slide. There is a 3rd path that we use that was designated by our stat medevac team at their discretion, and that was to alleviate some concerns of the neighboring communities, specifically the secondary PennDOT path. If you go next slide. So how those flight paths are used today operationally, the path shown green is what is used most frequently. The path shown in yellow is what's used as our designated alternate, and the path shown in red is rarely used, only when, on very rare occasions, when it's necessary to maintain safe operation. Next slide. So during construction, for approximately 18 months, there will be a necessary interruption to the path that was shown in green to allow the use of our tower cranes to help construct the building. Next slide. During that time, the path that was green would then be red, so it's unavailable. The path that was our alternate is now our primary, and then the path that was our secondary, what's shown as PennDOT designated secondary would be our functional alternate. We do not anticipate that the use of the secondary flight path towards Henley Farms would noticeably increase. We've talked with our flight crews, and they believe that they can still accommodate the same volume of flights through the use of the path shown in green only. Next slide. And that is it. So we can open it up for questions.
Great. While everybody else gets their questions typed in, I had a couple for you. Are you planning to go to CDAP to get, that's the city's design advisory panel? Are you scheduled to go there? And if so, could we get a report at the next meeting of information that they provided or input that they provided?
We are planning. We are not scheduled, and we certainly can provide the report.
Okay. And I wonder if we could see a ground level rendering on DeSoto Street itself of what DeSoto Street is going to look and feel like from a pedestrian level on the sidewalk as part of your presentation.
I know that's something
we actually have that.
Yeah.
Well, you have from Fifth Avenue.
Right. We have some
don't
other
have
ones we
in the
can
street
definitely
itself.
show in another presentation. But we have some farther up the street that we can show later.
Right, so not from Fifth Avenue, but on DeSoto Street itself. I think that would be helpful. And I was wondering if you could also include views from other, like further away, what the view landscape is going to be like from multiple places. If you were in places, I don't exactly know how to articulate it, but, further away than just at the site itself, what are you going to see? How you can see the Cathedral of Learning from all different places in Oakland. If you could show some of those images in your presentation, I think that would be helpful for the community to see. And you said that you're planning to go to zoning in March, but do you actually have to go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment, or did you just mean the Planning Commission?
I might not be articulating correctly. Roger?
Yeah, Wanda, this is Roger Altmer. So we are required to go to Planning Commission. We're through. We don't need to go through council because it's part of an approved institutional master plan, but we definitely have to go through the Planning Commission.
Right, and you don't need to go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment because it's part of your IMP and you're not seeking any variances.
We're not seeking any variances for this particular project, correct?
Right. Okay. Now, I don't see any other, I think everybody is very tired and too tired to type input and questions. So I don't see any. I will see if anybody just by phone is still on the line. So there are a couple people who are phone only, didn't have the benefit of seeing everything or the opportunity to say something and, to type something in the chat. So if there's a phone only person who has a question, you can unmute and ask it now. Okay, and I think that we have one comment. If you could put street names in your animation.
Wanda, this is Roger Altmer again. One thing we do need to clean up also is that we continue to show the contraflow lane along Fifth Avenue. We'll remove that. That becomes a bike only lane. With
I think during your project, the bike lane would be happening at the time that this project would be done. So yeah, I think that would be great for showing how that's all going to be coordinated. And I feel like that could be another whole meeting or discussion itself to look at coordination of that construction schedule with this project as well.
Yeah, we've been having some dialogue with Amy Silberman and Denise Ott from the Port Authority relative to the BRT. We think according to their schedule, they'll be out in front of our project in the summer of 2023. So we certainly have a very active dialogue with that group.
Yeah, and I think further along, further closer to the time, it would be great for, for us to have a presentation for the community around how all of these, in terms of schedule and impact and closures, sidewalk closures, construction, that kind of thing. But yeah, I think it would be great to show that bike lane in your renderings for sure. Let's see. So we have one question about for your flight path. If a helicopter is coming from south, how do they get to that flight path? Which way will they be? Because I think now they come through the park, right? If they're.
So my understanding, and I will follow up to get you a much better answer, but my current understanding is they only need to enter the path at the way it's represented. They just have to enter from the very end of the path, but the pilots have more kind of operational control of how they get to that point. With some, I would say, staff provides some guidance of where not to go. So I know that's not a perfect answer, but I suspect if they're coming from the south and they know where not to go, then they can take really any other path at the higher elevations to get to that point, and then they enter there and kind of make their way along the path to the landing spot.
Yeah, I think it might be good for us to get a little bit more. Yeah, if you could have a little bit more information about that at a future meeting.
Yeah, Wanda, we can provide that clarity. You're right. Today they go through the park, and then they enter in to go up the south path, the main path. We have used that other path that will be the alternate during construction. And I believe they go through kind of like the Hill District, then go over the Pete and then come in that way. But we'll get our staff medevac involved, and then we can show kind of a diagram and have them speak to it.
Yeah, I think that would impact, would potentially impact other parts of the residential neighborhoods. Even though what you're showing on your plan is a particular flight path, the question is how they get to that flight path, right? So that's, if you could elaborate on that. And the pilots have discretion, but if their discretion is constantly going over Oakland houses, that could be a real impact on neighbors. Because right now, a lot of it would be through the park and not necessarily right over people's homes.
Yeah, well, we can provide that.
Okay. Great. I don't see any other. So just to, we'll confirm, we'll have to work out some schedule details with you when to have you back for the official development activities meeting, which would be the one that's required before you go to Planning Commission, and we'll let everybody know. And we have some information if you wanted to provide some feedback, or if you think of a question later that you would like to ask, we have a feedback form that's there on this slide in front of you. So feel free, or if somebody who couldn't make the meeting today, so they didn't have the opportunity to ask a question in the chat and they want to provide some information or questions, and then we'll be able to get that over to you, John, and your team if we have other input from people after this meeting.
Yeah, it sounds good. It's a big building. It's an important building, and there's a lot to discuss. So we're happy to provide more information.
Great. And then just other information here on this last slide of resources you can find on the OPDC website and on social media. So thanks to everyone. Thanks to the UPMC team for your presentation tonight. Thanks for everybody for joining us and sticking through what is a long meeting. So it was an endurance event. We typically don't have them quite as long. So thanks everybody for participating and engaging in the items this evening. So we'll conclude the meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.